major changes are coming for the Detroit Pistons. An article written by James Edwards, he highlighted the failures of Monty Williams, but he also pointed out that the roster pretty much remained the same from a 17-win team. So I guess my first question to you is, who do you blame more for the failures, Troy Weaver or Monty Williams, for this season?
I don't think you can really hit Monty as much as I want to blame him. I really don't think you can hit him with everything, like the whole kitchen sink. I don't think it's all his fault. I really don't think he's. I mean, yeah, we talk about and complain about roster rotation and how we think it's just he's putting out lineups that we think are unsuccessful, and he's taking out starters at part of the game that you cannot be losing momentum in. Like it's something that a Pistons fan that has watched Detroit basketball for a long period of time, something that we notice every game of what he's doing as a coach. And plus two, not only his rotations are poor, but it doesn't seem like he's giving any energy to anybody. It's like, dude, you're paying me $136 million. I'm going to be screaming every game just because I can. Like, I think he needs to show a little bit more effort. So, but I don't think it's all on him. I don't think it's all on him. It's been past 2 years. You said how many games have we won or lost in 2 years? 100 something?
131.
Monty wasn't last year.
Yeah.
So we can't blame him for last year. So I feel like you have to blame Weaver. Like you can't blame Monty for X amount of losses from 2022 to 2023 season because he wasn't even here. So I think if you're going to point any fingers, more than half the blame's at Troy.
So here's a question, and it might be a dumb question, but do you think at any point during the regular season, Monty Williams said to himself, this roster is a disaster. I'm going to coach in a way that shows Troy Weaver and Tom Gores that this is a bad roster. Like, I'm going to fail on purpose, essentially. Do you ever think that might have crossed his mind as a coach?
It could have. I don't see the success rate of that, of trying to point fingers and show that it's not his problem. But I'll rally back to him just being there for 1 year. Like I don't think there's a whole lot you can do in this, like the system that they had in place already for him to actually motivate these guys to adapt to the culture that he wanted to implement. And I think you give him a little bit more time to figure out what he wants to do. And that comes from Weaver giving a little bit more trust to Monty to be able to make the decisions that he wants to make.
Okay, so we know changes are coming. This has been talked about, and we talked about it last week where neither of us are really in agreement with adding another cook to the kitchen because we heard a report, again by James Edwards, that the Pistons were looking to add a president of basketball operations. So it looks like it's going to happen in the front office. Do you think that Troy Weaver will be back next season? Do you think he'll be allowed to make moves this offseason, or do you think he'll be the guy cut going into the offseason?
We all want him cut.
We do.
We all do. And Tom Gores needs to kind of understand that as a fan base, it's obvious that we're kind of downward spiraling right now. Like it's rough for us to kind of want to invest money and time into this team, especially when, how long has Weaver been there?
I want to say this is going to be his fourth year.
It'll be fourth or fifth year. So are you going to give us another one of it? Because that's kind of where we're going. Like it's a system that change I think is important. If you are like always not unsuccessful in doing something, I feel like it's kind of a thing that you need to move on from it and adapt to something different. Look at what other teams are doing with their GMs and their ownership, and kind of move along that way. I just, with Weaver arguing with fans in the crowd and just not really, and honestly, even when he was arguing with that fan and that clip came out, he looked down bad. Like that man he looked like he just wasn't having it anymore, man. And if you're out there arguing with a fan, that's also really rough, getting him thrown out of the game. I mean, he was one of only 30 people there, so that's money in the concessions for you. Like he's going to get a Little Caesars pizza. That's $20. You just lost $20. So I don't like Weaver in this situation. I haven't liked him the last 2 years. His moves and his draft picks have been mediocre. I think you move on from it, but also as Tom Gores, and you're going to move on from Weaver, if you're going to do this, you really kind of need to talk to Monty Williams and figure out what Monty wants to do.
I get the feeling that Troy Weaver is a grifter. And he's a fraud. He doesn't really know his job that well. And I get so tired of Pistons fans saying, but look at the talent he acquired. I don't think I think I could have made the pick of Cade Cunningham at number 1. I think if Jaden Ivey had fell to me at number 5, it would be a toss-up between him and Benedict Mathurin. But, I would probably make the same mistake that Troy Weaver did, even though there was a part of me that was like, yeah, but Benedict Mathurin, it does make sense next to Cade. I feel like there's a lot of guys that could have made the same decisions, maybe even made, and I'm just talking strictly fans, guys that, like us, that host a podcast and talk about the Pistons. I feel like we could have made a lot of the same decisions as Troy Weaver, and that's why I feel like he's a grifter. Like, the story about him, like, yeah, he kind of helped Carmelo Anthony. He kind of helped Syracuse recruit Carmelo Anthony. Dude, he was one of the best players in the country at the time. I'm sure Syracuse knew about him, and then
Carmelo should have been a Piston.
We'll talk about that at some other point, but
all right, sorry,
don't do that right now. Don't do that. There's a better name than Carmelo that should have been drafted at number 2, and I've told this to Ben Wallace. But what, man? You made me lose my train of thought. Oh, if you even go back to the Russell Westbrook draft, there's those reports where man, Troy Weaver, he was saying my job's on the line. You need to draft him at number 4. I would have to go and look back, but I don't think there were many mock drafts that didn't have Russell Westbrook that high. I think he was kind of already known as you got to get this guy if you have a position to draft him. So basically what I'm getting at is I think Troy Weaver's a fraud. And I think he was given a lot of credit for obvious moves. And it's cost the Pistons dearly. It really has.
So you think even if you took just a regular Joe and threw him in his seat, we'd still be in the same position we're at right now? The cards have not really fallen in our favor to be successful when it comes to drafting players?
I think a majority of Pistons fans would, if we were in the same seat as Troy Weaver, and I'm just talking strictly drafting, we would be in a similar situation. I think most of us would do this, the level of job Troy Weaver has done as acquiring talent through the draft. Now, I don't think a lot of us understand the contracts and how to bring guys in, but I think in terms of drafting, a lot of us would have made the exact same decisions. I do think there are a few that would have made better decisions than Troy Weaver. And that's a really small amount, but that's what I'm kind of getting at. I just think Troy Weaver's done such a bad job, and just some of the picks were so obvious. Anybody could have made those picks.
Yeah,
that's where I'm getting at it.
Yeah.
So I have one final question for this topic, and do you think one of the major moves could be the Pistons trading one of the core 4?
I think it's gonna be. I think Monty, he hasn't expressed it to the media, but I think he's expressed it through his coaching. I think he's kind of showed how he wants to maneuver going forward with this team. And we've already kind of talked about Jaden Ivey not really being someone that's been beloved by that staff, at least he's been cold shouldered. I think he's on the first to be moved. So I think a 4 will be moved and transitioned after the draft. I don't think it'll be before the draft, but I think with this draft, depending on who we take at whatever 1 through 5 that we get, I think that'll tell us a lot of what we're going to be doing in the offseason, of what they're trying to focus, whether it's guard play or whether it's a big.
Yeah, other than a couple of games, he had a 31-point game against Memphis. That was a G League team. He had 25 points against Philadelphia. And other than that, Jaden Ivey, he kind of had a bad stretch of games towards the end of the season. Yeah, I hated that. I always feel like I'm always picking on Jaden Ivey, but I can't help it. I can't help it. I feel so bad, but I just can't help it.
I don't think he's a bad player. I really think a lot of the intangibles that he has, and not even just him, anybody coming out of the draft, your success rate is based off what the situation you get placed in. Like, I think that is like 50% of where you're set and how you're coached and who you're surrounded by in the NBA than it is for really what your skill set is. Because if you're going into the draft, you're obviously good enough to get picked. Like, if you're invited to the combine, like, you're a good player. These guys aren't bad players. They're all NBA players when they get picked. So they have the assets to be on a team. And maybe Jaden Ivey he got picked to the wrong team. And he had a bad start in Detroit. Like, Bruce Brown wasn't great in Detroit. He went and just won a championship in Denver, and he had a different role as a sixth man, seventh man off the bench, and he was super successful. And then he chased a bag, and now he's not on a good team anymore. Like, so but he got what he wanted, and he kind of and him leaving and kind of exposing the Pistons, like, that he wasn't a good system fit for them. Going and winning a championship kind of proves that even if he's a mid-tier player, he can still go be successful for some other team.
Do you know why Bruce Brown got traded?
Enlighten me.
So the story is, and he said this on a podcast, I think it was Theo Pinson's podcast, and it was he got traded because he went home to celebrate his birthday with his family. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the story.
How does that make any sense?
Dude, I have no idea.
You're not allowed to love other people. We're doing this.
He also said there's something about like guys making their beds. That's what he looks for in draft. It's so weird.
Can we go back to the Weaver thing and how he's just not good at his job? If this is all true,
that's what I'm saying.
This is not it. Like, if you don't stir your chocolate milk more than 7 times, it sucks and you're not drafted. Like, what are you saying, dude? Like, oh my